Okay, so now here's the first part of the form where you're seeing pretty much exactly what the participants are seeing. You're seeing an anonymized graphic that shows what the results of everybody's initial option evaluations were. So it's a good idea to run over and grab some of the text from the moderator script that just explains the graphic right to the participants. So explain what it is, explain the support and also the consensus axes and what those mean, just so that people can go ahead and take a look at the graphic and start to make sense of it for themselves. So, as we're telling folks, but just also for us here, so you can see that support for the actions is the left to right axis. So actions that had high support for the action and also high acceptance of the drawbacks would be way over here at the right. We don't have anywhere it's super, super high. If people support the action somewhat, but maybe are conflicted or a little bit mixed on the acceptance of the drawback, you'd see actions here in the middle. And if an action was not hardly supported in the first place, you'd see it way over here. So the consensus axis from top to bottom shows how mixed opinions were. So if a big fraction of the group is in agreement, you'd be up here. So you can see these are. If opinions very mixed, then it'll be lower down. So if people really didn't like an action, and a lot of people felt that way, you'd see it over here. If there wasn't much support for an action, but feelings were kind of mixed about it, you'd see it over here in this section. So it looks like that's a case of E. So here's one more thing that moderators can do that participants can't. You can go ahead, you can see, if you look down here, Kara Palacio's evaluation, you can see what Kara thought about action D. And you could flip through, and this would show you all the different views that Kara had about the different actions. You could also look to see what different people thought about, say, let's look at this one that people were very mixed on. And you could see what Kara thought of E. Then you could look at what April thought of E, Kenny, and Kyle. You could take a look at everybody. It's not necessarily a good idea to take advantage of this information or make it public over in the chat, but it can maybe help you figure out questions to ask people. Basically, the most important things to do is to use the group evaluation only as a starting point. A lot of times moderators like to start by looking at the actions where there seems to be pretty high support and consensus on it, and to just press people to think about the trade-offs. So you could do that for D. You could maybe even talk about D and C together, since those are pretty close together and are pretty closely related actions. Then you might move on to either B or A, or kind of let the group conversation take you where it will. It is a good idea to keep the group all talking about one or at most two actions at a time if a couple of actions are kind of related to each other. But it is a good idea to kind of keep people talking about one action at a time, and to do so by letting people know, hey, we're going to move on to talking about option A in just a minute. If there are no last comments, we'll do that in 30 seconds. It's also good to use shorthand somewhat, but to also feel free to copy and paste the actual description of the action so that people know what you're talking about when you're doing that over there. So you can go ahead and do that. And then the most important things to do in this are to manage time, but also to let people know that if anybody changes their mind at any time, you can always, based on something that somebody says, you can always change your mind. So after you've got people started talking, at some point it can be a good idea to help people remember that if anything that anybody says makes them change their mind, they can always change their evaluations down here. They can only see their own evaluations, but they can change those at any time. There's a little bit in the script where it shows people how to do that, and it's a good idea to paste that in if you don't see any action. It's a good idea to paste that reminder in so that people know that if they genuinely are hearing anything that is making them rethink their support for an action or their acceptance of a drawback, that they can always change their evaluation, and that it will change the group's graphic in real time.